When I was a kid, we used to go camping most summers in the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, and we would do all the normal camping things, especially hiking. We did a lot of hiking. And our hikes eventually became fondly referred to as death marches because they would be led by my aunt. And she would always agree to a 4-mile hike, and that's what we would all agree to too. And then we would end up doing 10 or 12. And she became famous for the phrase, "Oh, it's just over the next ridge." And what she meant was that the turnaround, where we could, go back to camp, was just over the next ridge. And we would crest each ridge full of hope and see no variation in the trail whatsoever. Recently, I found this to be a useful analogy for learning. Every time that I make a big breakthrough, the thing that I discover most is how much I still don't know. While this is true in everything, it seems especially true when it comes to matters of race. I'm a white guy, and that makes me one of the most privileged people. And in order to be comfortable with my identity, I have to acknowledge and accept that. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to say black and not African American. This is incredibly intentional, and there are 3 reasons. The first is popular opinion, as I've come to experience it. Most black people that I know have told me that they are more comfortable with me saying black. The second is personal. I'm white, and everybody calls me white. So to refer to someone else differently seems weird. Which brings me nicely to my third reason, which is more societal. To say that someone is anything hyphen American implies that they're whatever else they are first, and that bothers me. I think black, white, Latino, whatever we are, we're all American. I spent 3 months in England when I was 17, and in England they've done away with the hyphenated nationality. You won't hear anybody referred to as African British. I think this is a step in the right direction. There is a black British culture, but that is not to say that it relies on Africa. I also spent a year in Germany when I was 7. So I have some experience being the lone American in a room, and it's a little uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable made me more comfortable with who I am. It was until ethnic studies, my freshman year, that I was really comfortable. Ethnic studies made me really uncomfortable because I started to study other people's heritage. And the study of other people's heritage is mostly the study of how my heritage is a heritage of oppression. My heritage is a heritage of people taking what they wanted because they wanted it. Becoming comfortable with who I am was really difficult after that. And the only way that I could come up with to do it is to acknowledge all of the ways that I'm privileged. And part of acknowledging all the ways that I'm privileged is acknowledging that I will never know all of the ways that I'm privileged. I would argue that the biggest aspect of white privilege, white male privilege in particular, is the mindset that accompanies it. Being a white man means that there are just a lot of things that you don't have to think about. So, some examples. Both of my parents work here at BGSU, and then they both sometimes stay and work late, and then they both walk out to their cars in the dark. This is something that I know my dad does without thinking, and it's something that I know my mom has to think about. Another example, I've been pulled over a few times, speeding, turning right where I shouldn't have, and it's never really been a concern for me. I might get a ticket, I might not, but either way, it'll probably be fine. And I don't know that that's true for everyone, but I feel like it should be. The best example of a white mindset and white privilege came to me when I was 14. I was listening to a radio program on entrepreneurial spirit and overcoming adversity, and it was an overweight black woman narrating. This becomes important to the story later on. She was talking about how she and her 2 white male friends had come up with this business idea, and they were traveling to a conference to present it. They were in the dressing room, and one of the conference organizers, it was a middle-aged white guy, stuck his head in, and he asked who was going to be leading the presentation. they agreed that she would be leading the presentation, and he looked at the other two white guys in the room and he said, "Really? You're going to let the fat black girl present this?" I was appalled, partly about what had been said, but also partly about what she said next. She said that she was so upset that she had to leave the room. I couldn't understand it. She hadn't done anything wrong. He had been the one who said the offensive thing, so why did she feel like she had to leave the room? And I said to my mom, if I were in her shoes, I would have told him to leave the room. And she said to me, "Right, it's because you're a white guy and you've never felt like you had to leave a room." That's really stuck with me. A white mindset is an amazing thing, and I would argue that cultural awareness is being aware of all the things that you don't have to think about. I'm a white guy. I'm pretty comfortable with who I am for the most part, and that involves acknowledging all of the ways that I'm privileged and all of the ways that it's probably easier sometimes to be me than other people. But part of acknowledging that is also acknowledging that just because it is easier doesn't mean that it necessarily always feels like it's easy to be me. Learning is hard. We struggle up these ridges, and each time we reach the top, we hope that that's the last one. I've come to understand, and I think most intelligent people would agree with me, that you're never done learning. There's never the last ridge. The best I can hope to do is to climb my personal mountain high enough to see and understand the struggles that other people have to go through. Thank you.